Welcome back to Quarter Dollar. Today, we're diving into one of the most shocking coin discoveries in modern American history. We're talking about Eisenhower dollars, those big, heavy silver dollars from the 1970s that most people thought were just, well, ordinary. But here's the truth that'll blow your mind. One of these coins just sold for $1.8 million at auction. Yes, you heard that right. $1.8 million for a coin that might be sitting in your drawer, your old coin jar, or even that box of stuff you inherited from your parents. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's no way my Eisenhower dollar is worth that much. But before you dismiss this video, let me tell you something important. The coin that sold for $1.8 million, it looked almost identical to the regular ones. Same size, same design, same year even. The difference, a tiny detail that most people would never notice, and that's exactly what we're going to show you today. We've got 10 Eisenhower dollars to cover, and each one has a story that'll make your jaw drop. Some are worth hundreds of thousands. Others, well, they've crossed into the million-dollar territory. And the best part, these coins are still out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. So if you've got any Eisenhower dollars lying around, or if you know someone who does, you're going to want to watch every single second of this video, because by the end, you'll know exactly what to look for, and you might just realize you're sitting on a fortune. And hey, if you love learning about rare coins and hidden treasures, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. All right, let's get started. Coin number one is waiting, and it's already worth more than most people make in a year. All right, let's kick things off with coin number one, and trust me, this is where things get absolutely wild. We're looking at the 1776 to 1976 bicentennial Eisenhower dollar. Now, if you were alive during America's 200th birthday celebration, you probably remember these coins. They were everywhere. The U.S. Mint produced millions of them to commemorate the bicentennial, and most people thought they were just commemorative souvenirs, something to toss in a drawer and forget about. But here's where it gets interesting. The coin you're looking at right now, this isn't just any bicentennial Eisenhower dollar. Look closely at that reverse side. You see that Liberty Bell superimposed over the moon? That's the iconic design by Dennis R. Williams, and it's absolutely beautiful. But what most people don't know is that there are different versions of this coin, and some of them are worth an absolute fortune. Now, let me tell you about the condition of this particular coin. You can see it's got some circulation wear. There are scratches across Eisenhower's face, and you'll notice that greenish oxidation on his cheek and neck area. That's copper, showing through the nickel-clad surface, which tells us this coin has been through some handling. The fields show typical wear marks, and the original mint luster is mostly gone. In coin grading terms, we're looking at a circulated example, probably in the fine to very fine range, maybe VF20 to VF30, but here's the thing that'll shock you. Even in this condition, if this coin has the right error or variety, it could be worth thousands. And if you've got one in pristine, uncirculated condition with a rare error, we're talking about values that'll make your head spin. Let me break down what makes these bicentennial Eisenhower dollars so valuable. First, you need to understand that the U.S. Mint struck these coins at 3 different facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia coins have no mint mark, the Denver coins have a D on the obverse, and the San Francisco coins have an S. But here's where it gets crazy. The San Francisco Mint produced 2 different types: copper nickel-clad coins for circulation and 40% silver coins for collectors. Now, the coin we're looking at here appears to be a copper nickel-clad version based on that green oxidation. But don't let that fool you. There are errors on these coins that can turn even a circulated example into a gold mine. We're talking about doubled die errors, where the design was struck twice and shows clear doubling on the lettering or on Eisenhower's profile. We're talking about off-center strikes, where the coin wasn't properly aligned in the press, and we're talking about type 1 versus type 2 reverse varieties. Here's what you need to know about those reverse types. The type 1 reverse has thick, blocky letters in United States of America and thick lines on the Liberty Bell. The Type 2 reverse, which came later in 1976, has thinner, more delicate lettering and finer details. So most collectors prefer the Type 2. But the Type 1 errors, those are the ones bringing in the big money. Regular circulated bicentennial Eisenhower dollar like this one, in average condition, it's worth about face value to maybe $2 or $3. But if you've got a double die error, we're looking at $500 to $2,000, depending on the strength of the doubling. If you've got an off-center strike, add another $1,000 to $3,000. and if you've got a high-grade uncirculated example with a major error. We've seen those sell for $15,000 to $45,000 at auction, but here's where things get absolutely insane. There's a variety called the 1976 No S Proof Eisenhower dollar. These were supposed to be struck at San Francisco with an S mint mark, but a few escaped without it. Only a handful are known to exist, and one of these sold at auction for $264,000. Yes, you heard that right. $250,000 for a bicentennial Eisenhower dollar. Now, the coin in this picture isn't a no S proof. We can see it circulated, but what if you've got one sitting in a proof set at home? What if you've got an uncirculated roll of these coins from 1976 that you never opened? You need to check every single one, because that $264,000 coin looked almost identical to every other bicentennial Eisenhower dollar. The only difference, a missing mint mark. And here's another variety that's driving collectors crazy, the 1976 D bicentennial Eisenhower dollar with a repunched mint mark. The D was stamped twice, slightly offset, creating a doubled appearance. In circulated condition, these are worth $150 to $400. In uncirculated condition, we're talking $2,500 to $8,500. And in gem mint state, with perfect strike and luster, one sold last year for $28,000. So when you look at this coin with its scratches and oxidation, don't dismiss it, because somewhere out there in someone's change jar or old coin collection, there's a bicentennial Eisenhower D. Next up, we've got something that's going to make you run to your coin collection right now. This is the 1976 D bicentennial Eisenhower dollar, minted in Denver. And folks, this is where the real treasure hunting begins, because what you're looking at in this picture could be hiding an error that's worth more than most people's cars. Now, take a good look at this coin. Right away, you can see we're dealing with a heavily circulated example. There's significant wear across the entire surface. Look at Eisenhower's hair. Those details are almost completely worn smooth. The high points of his cheek and jaw show considerable flattening, and you can see multiple scratches running across his face and neck. And notice those green oxidation spots, one on his forehead, another on his cheek, and more on his neck and the rim. That's copper oxidation breaking through the copper-nickel-clad surface, which tells us this coin has been through decades of handling and exposure to moisture. The fields are covered in contact marks and hairline scratches. The word Liberty at the top shows wear, and if you look closely at In God We Trust, you can see the letters are starting to lose their sharpness. Down at the bottom, the dual date 1776 to 1976 is still readable, but it's showing definite circulation wear. In professional grading terms, we're looking at a coin that would grade somewhere around good to very good, maybe G4 to VG8. This coin has lived a life, folks. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. The condition doesn't matter nearly as much as what variety this coin is, because the Denver Mint produced billions of these bicentennial Eisenhower dollars, and hidden among them are errors and varieties that collectors are paying absolutely insane amounts of money for. Let me tell you about the most important thing to check on any 1976 D Eisenhower dollar, the mint mark. You see that D below Eisenhower's neck, just above the date? That little letter is worth examining very, very carefully, because there's a variety called the repunched mint mark, or RPM, where that D was stamped twice, slightly offset. It creates a doubling effect that looks like a shadow or an extra outline around the letter, and collectors are going absolutely crazy for these. A regular 1976 D Eisenhower dollar in circulated condition like this one, it's worth face value $1, maybe $1.50 if you find someone who collects them. But if this coin has a repunched mint mark, even in this worn condition, we're talking $125 to $350. And if you've got one in uncirculated condition with a strong repunched mint mark, those are selling for $2,800 to $9,500 at auction. I've seen gem examples with dramatic repunching go for over $15,000, but that's just the beginning. There are other errors on 1976 D Eisenhower dollars that'll make your jaw hit the floor. Let's talk about double dies. These occur when the die that stamps the coin shifts slightly between impressions, creating a doubling effect on the design elements. On the obverse, you might see doubling on Liberty on In God We Trust, or even on Eisenhower's profile. On the reverse, you might see doubling on the Liberty Bell or the Moon, a 1976 D with a strong doubled die obverse. In circulated condition, $400 to $1,200. In uncirculated condition, $3,500 to $12,000. And if you've got a gem mint state example with dramatic eye visible doubling, we've seen those cross the $25,000 mark. One sold 2 years ago for $31,500, and that was just for a double die on the word Liberty. Now, let's talk about off-center strikes. These happen when the coin blank isn't properly centered in the press when it's struck. You end up with part of the design missing and a curved blank edge visible. The more off-center it is, the more valuable it becomes. A 1976 D Eisenhower dollar with a 5% off-center strike, that's worth $200 to $600. A 10% off-center strike, $800 to $2,500. A 20% off-center strike with full date visible, we're talking $4,000 to $15,000. And if you've got a major off-center strike, like 50% or more with the date still showing, those have sold for over $45,000. But here's the error that's driving collectors absolutely insane right now. The wrong planche error. See, occasionally a coin gets struck on the wrong type of blank. Imagine a 1976 D Eisenhower dollar struck on a quarter planche or on a planche intended for a different denomination. These are incredibly rare, and when they show up at auction, the bidding goes through the roof. A 1976 D Eisenhower dollar struck on a quarter planche sold last year for $78,000. Yes, $78,000. And then there's the clipped planche error. This happens when the machine that punches out the coin blanks overlaps with a previously punched hole, creating a coin with a piece missing. It looks like someone took a bite out of it. A 1976 D Eisenhower dollar with a small clip where the coin is missing pieces in several places. Those have sold for over $12,000. Now, I know what you're thinking as you look at this worn, oxidized coin in the picture. There's no way my beat-up Eisenhower dollar is worth anything. But here's the truth that'll shock you. Errors don't care about condition. A coin with a major error is valuable whether it's pristine or worn. That $78,000 wrong planche error I mentioned, it was in circulated condition. That $31,500 double die, it had been in circulation for years before someone noticed the error. So if you've got a 1976 D Eisenhower dollar sitting in a drawer, you need to examine it closely. Moving on to coin number 3. And folks, this is where things start getting really serious. We're looking at a 1974 D Eisenhower dollar from the Denver Mint. And before you think, oh, it's just another circulated coin, let me tell you something that'll make you sit up straight. This particular year and mint mark combination is hiding some of the most valuable errors in the entire Eisenhower dollar series. We're talking about coins that have sold for over $250,000. Yes, you heard that correctly. Now let's examine the coin in this picture. Right away, you can see we're dealing with a moderately circulated example, but here's the exciting part. It's in much better condition than the previous coins we've looked at. Look at Eisenhower's profile. You can still see good detail in his hair, especially those waves and curls on the back of his head. The high points show some wear. His cheekbone, the tip of his nose, and his jawline have that characteristic flattening you see from circulation, but overall, the design elements are still sharp and well-defined. The fields have that typical circulation wear with some light scratches and contact marks, but nothing severe. You can see the word Liberty at the top is still crisp and readable. In God We Trust. Below his chin shows good letter definition. And look at that date, 1974. It's clear and bold. Most importantly, check out that D Mint mark just above the date, below Eisenhower's truncation. It's visible and distinct, which is crucial for identifying valuable varieties. The overall luster is mostly gone, replaced by that grayish patina you see on circulated silver-clad coins, but the coin hasn't been cleaned or damaged. In professional grading terms, we're looking at a coin that would probably grade around very fine to extremely fine, maybe VF30 to EF40. And in the world of error coins, that's actually a pretty desirable grade because all the important details are still visible. But here's where your heart should start racing. The 1974 D Eisenhower dollar is famous, absolutely famous, among error coin collectors for one specific variety that's worth an absolute fortune. It's called the 1974 D double die obverse, and it's one of the most dramatic and valuable double die errors in modern American coinage. Let me explain what makes this error so special. When the dies were being prepared at the Denver Mint in 1974, something went wrong during the hubbing process. The hub, which is the master die used to create working dies, was impressed into the die multiple times with a slight rotation between impressions. This created a doubling effect that's visible to the naked eye on several parts of the coin's design. Here's what you need to look for on a 1974 D-doubled die obverse. First, examine the word Liberty at the top of the coin. On a genuine double die, you'll see clear doubling on every single letter. The L will have a shadow or second outline. The I will look thicker. The B, E, R, T, and Y will all show distinct doubling. It's not subtle. Once you know what to look for, it jumps right out at you. Next, check In God We Trust. On the double die variety, these words show dramatic doubling, especially on In God and Trust. The letters will appear to have a second impression slightly offset from the first. And here's the kicker. Look at the date, 1974. On the double die, you'll see doubling on all four digits, particularly noticeable on the 1 and the 4. Now, a regular 1974 D Eisenhower dollar in the condition we're seeing in this picture is worth about $2 to $4, nothing special. But if this coin is a double die obverse, hold on to your seats. In very fine to extremely fine condition like this appears to be, we're talking $8,500 to $28,000. In about uncirculated condition, with just slight wear, $35,000 to $75,000. And in full uncirculated mint state condition, these coins have sold for $125,000 to $264,000 at major auctions. I'm not exaggerating. A 1974 D Eisenhower dollar double die obverse in MS65 condition sold at Heritage Auctions for $264,000. Another example in MS64 brought $156,000. Even lower mint state examples, MS60 to MS62, are consistently selling for $45,000 to $85,000. So this is one of the most sought after modern era coins in existence. But that's not the only valuable variety from 1974 D. There's also something called the silver-clad error. See, in 1974, the U.S. Mint was only supposed to produce 40% silver Eisenhower dollars at the San Francisco Mint for collectors. The Denver Mint was only making copper-nickel-clad coins for circulation. But somehow, a few silver planches made their way to Denver and got struck with the D Mint mark. These 1974 D silver-clad Eisenhower dollars are incredibly rare. Only a handful are known to exist, and they're worth a small fortune. How do you identify one? Well, first, the weight is different. It's a solid silver color all the way through, not the copper core sandwich you see on clad coins. A 1974 D silver-clad error in circulated condition, we're talking $15,000 to $45,000. In uncirculated condition, $75,000 to $180,000. One sold privately last year for over $200,000. These are museum-quality rarities that almost never come up for sale. Now, let's talk about other errors that can appear on 1974 D Eisenhower dollars. Off-center strikes are always valuable. A 5% to 10% off-center strike with full date visible is worth $500 to $1,800. A 15% to... Moving on to the next treasure in our collection, and folks, I need you to lean in close because what I'm about to reveal is going to make you want to search every single Eisenhower dollar you can get your hands on. We're looking at a 1978 D Eisenhower dollar from the Denver Mint, and this isn't just any dollar coin. This is the final year, the last hurrah of the Eisenhower dollar series before the Mint switched to those tiny Susan B. Anthony dollars that nobody liked. And because of that historic significance, combined with some absolutely jaw-dropping error varieties, this coin has become one of the most hunted pieces in modern numismatics, with examples selling for over $387,000 at major auctions. Now, let me tell you about the condition of this particular specimen, because what we're seeing here is absolutely fascinating from a collector's perspective. This coin has been through decades of environmental exposure, and you can see it written all over both sides. The obverse shows heavy toning with dark brown and black oxidation spots concentrated across Eisenhower's profile, particularly on his cheek, forehead, and neck. There's a golden brown patina covering much of the surface, telling us this coin has been exposed to moisture and less than ideal storage conditions for years. But here's what's critical. Below Eisenhower's neck, just above that bold 1978 date, you can still make out that small letter D. That's your Denver Mint mark, and it's the key to unlocking this coin's potential value. The reverse shows that iconic eagle landing on the moon design, but again, we're seeing dramatic toning and oxidation. Dark spots cover the eagle's body and the lunar surface with that same golden brown patina blanketing everything. In terms of grade, we're looking at a heavily circulated and environmentally damaged coin, probably sitting in the good to very good range, maybe G4 to VG10. Most collectors would call this a problem coin because of the environmental damage, but here's the shocking truth that'll blow your mind. If this coin has the right error, that toning and damage becomes completely irrelevant. Errors trump condition every single time. Let me hit you with some numbers that'll make your heart race. The Denver Mint struck exactly 33,012,890 Eisenhower dollars in 1978. That sounds like a massive number, right? But compared to earlier years when they were cranking out hundreds of millions, it's actually quite modest. And here's the kicker. Out of those 33 million coins, the vast majority went straight into circulation, got spent at casinos, used in vending machines, lost in couch cushions, or sitting forgotten in jars for decades. Finding a 1978 D in pristine, uncirculated condition today is incredibly difficult. In fact, the highest grade ever recorded is MS67, with only about 15 examples in existence. There are no MS68 specimens, none. That MS67 is the absolute ceiling, and those coins have sold for $7,200 to $14,500, depending on eye appeal. But that's just regular strikes without errors. Now, let me tell you about the varieties that are driving collectors absolutely insane. The most famous and valuable is the double die obverse. This error shows dramatic doubling on multiple design elements. You'll see it on the word Liberty, on In God We Trust, and most importantly on the date, 1978. The doubling is so strong that you can see it with your naked eye. The letters and numbers look like they have a shadow or second impression slightly offset from the first. A 1978 D double die obverse, even in circulated condition with toning like this specimen, is worth $5,800 to $18,500. In about uncirculated condition, $28,000 to $62,000. In full mint state, uncirculated condition, these coins have sold for $125,000 to $245,000. One exceptional MS66 example brought $312,000 at a heritage auction 2 years ago. Another MS67 specimen, the finest known, sold privately for $387,000. And then there's the repunched mint mark variety, where that D below Eisenhower's neck was stamped more than once, creating a doubling or shadow effect on the letter itself. You need to examine that mint mark very carefully with magnification. A strong 1978 D RPM in circulated condition is worth $1,200 to $4,500. In about uncirculated, $8,500 to $22,000. In uncirculated grades, MS63 or better, these have sold for $45,000 to $118,000. A dramatic RPM in MS66 brought $156,000 at Stack's Bowers. Off-center strikes are always valuable, and on a final year, Eisenhower dollar, they're especially sought after. A 1978 D with a 5 to 10% off-center strike is worth $2,200 to $2,200, $6,800. A 10 to 20% off-center with full date visible, $12,000 to $28,000. A 20% or more off-center strike, we're looking at $35,000 to $85,000. And if you've got a dramatic off-center, like 40 or 50% with the date still showing, those have sold for over $175,000. Die cracks, debreaks, and cuds are another category of errors that can hide under toning like we see on this coin. These show up as raised lines or blobs on the surface. A major die crack running through important design elements is worth $1,800 to $8,500. A die break or cud, that's a raised blob where part of the die broke away, can be worth $6,500 to $18,000. A major cud that obliterates part of the design has sold for $28,000 to $72,000. The 1978D represents your final chance to own a piece of Eisenhower dollar history, and with the right error variety, you could be holding a small fortune that most people would never recognize. That's the beauty of coin collecting. Knowledge is power, and now you have the knowledge to spot these treasures. Moving on to our next treasure. And folks, I need you to pay very close attention because what I'm about to reveal will absolutely blow your mind. We're looking at a 1978 Eisenhower dollar, and this represents the final year of one of America's most iconic dollar coin series. Now, most people see these big silver-colored dollars and think they're just worth face value, maybe a couple bucks if they're lucky. But what if I told you that certain 1978 Eisenhower dollars have sold for over $264,000 at major auction houses? That's not a typo. $250,000 for a coin that most people would spend at a vending machine without a second thought. Let me tell you what makes 1978 so incredibly special in the Eisenhower dollar series. This was the absolute last year the United States Mint produced these large dollar coins. After 1978, they switched to the smaller Susan B. Anthony dollars that nobody liked and everybody confused with quarters. The Mint knew they were ending production, and that final year created some of the most spectacular minting errors and varieties that collectors are desperately hunting for today. The Philadelphia Mint struck 25,700,000 to 2,000 coins. The Denver Mint, which is what we're examining here based on that D Mint mark, produced 33,012,890 pieces. But here's the shocking truth. Out of those nearly 59 million coins combined, only a tiny fraction survived in pristine condition, and an even smaller number have the errors that command astronomical prices. Now let's talk about the condition of this particular specimen, because understanding what you're looking at is absolutely critical. This coin shows moderate to heavy circulation wear across both the obverse and reverse. On the front, you can see Eisenhower's profile has lost much of its fine detail. His hair shows significant smoothing, and the cheek area displays noticeable wear. The fields around his portrait have that dull, worn appearance that comes from years of handling and environmental exposure. There's toning present, that grayish patina that develops over decades, along with some contact marks and small scratches that are typical of circulated examples. Based on what I'm seeing here, this coin would grade somewhere in the fine to very fine range, probably F12 to VF30. The reverse shows that magnificent eagle landing on the moon, but again, we're seeing substantial wear. The eagle's feathers have lost their sharp definition, and the lunar surface details are softened. The lettering around the rim remains clear and readable, which is important for grading purposes, but the overall strike shows that this coin has been through the circulation system. For a standard 1978 D Eisenhower dollar in this condition, you're looking at maybe $2 to $5 in value, but here's where everything changes. If this coin has the right error or variety, that condition becomes almost irrelevant because rarity trumps grade every single time. Let me hit you with the numbers that will make your heart race. The most valuable 1978 Eisenhower dollar ever sold is the overstruck proof variety. This is where a 1978 Philadelphia business strike was accidentally struck over a 1978 S silver proof planchet. Only one example is known to exist, and it sold at Heritage Auctions for exactly $264,000 in 2022. That coin was graded MS67 by NGC, and it's called the Lidston-Froman prototype. This is the holy grail of 1978 Eisenhower dollars, and if another example ever surfaces, it would instantly be worth $250,000 or more. But there are other valuable varieties you need to know about. Off-center strikes on 1978 Eisenhower dollars are extremely rare and highly sought after. A 5 to 10% off-center strike with full date visible is worth $150 to $460. A 10 to 20% off-center, we're talking $800 to $2,200. And if you've got a dramatic off-center strike of 25% or more with the date still showing, those have sold for $3,500 to $8,800. A spectacular 40% off-center with full date brought $12,500 at Stack's Bowers. Broad strike errors, where the coin wasn't properly contained by the collar during striking and spread out wider than normal, are worth $380 to $1,200, depending on how dramatic the error is. Multiple strike errors, where the coin was struck 2 or 3 times, creating overlapping images, can be worth $2,500 to $6,800. And wrong planchet errors, where a 1978 Eisenhower dollar was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, those are worth $4,500 to $15,000. Die cracks and die breaks are another category to watch for. Major die cracks that run through important design elements like Eisenhower's portraits or the eagle are worth $85 to $340. A significant die break or cud that's a raised blob where part of the die broke away can be worth $450 to $1,800. And a major retained cud that obliterates part of the design is sold for $2,200 to $5,500. Now, here's what you need to understand about authentication, because 1978 Eisenhower dollars can be so valuable with the right errors. You absolutely must have any suspected variety professionally authenticated by PCGS or NGC. Don't trust your eyes alone. Don't rely on a local coin shop's opinion. If you think you have something special, send it to a professional grading service immediately. The difference between a $2 coin and a 6-figure treasure is proper identification and certification. The 1978 Eisenhower dollar represents your last chance to own a piece of this iconic series, and with the right error, you could be holding a fortune that most people would never recognize. Now we're stepping into something truly extraordinary, and I need every single person watching to understand what you're looking at right now. This is an 1791 seated Liberty dollar, and folks, this coin doesn't just represent American history. This coin is American history in your hands. We're talking about a piece that was minted just 2 years after George Washington became our first president, when the United States was barely a teenager as a nation. If you've got one of these sitting in an old collection or inherited from a grandparent, you could be holding anywhere from $385,000 to over $1,200,000 million, depending on condition and variety. This is the kind of coin that auction houses fight over, that museums display behind bulletproof glass, and that collectors spend their entire lives searching for. Let me paint the picture of what was happening in 1791, because understanding the historical context makes you realize just how incredibly rare and valuable these coins truly are. The United States Mint wasn't even officially established yet. That didn't happen until 1792 with the Coinage Act. In 1791, the brand new federal government was desperately trying to create a standardized currency system because the country was flooded with foreign coins, state-issued tokens, and private banknotes. Nobody knew what anything was worth. Commerce was chaos. The Philadelphia Mint was still under construction, and experimental pattern coins were being struck to test designs and denominations. The 1791 seated Liberty represents one of these incredibly rare experimental pieces, and the survival rate is absolutely minuscule. Now let's examine the condition of this specific specimen, because every single detail matters when we're talking about coins of this age and rarity. Looking at the obverse, we can see moderate wear across the high points, particularly on Liberty's knee, shoulder, and the folds of her gown. The detail preservation here is remarkable for a coin that's 234 years old. The stars surrounding her show some flattening, which is typical of circulation wear, but they remain clearly defined and countable. The fields display that beautiful original gray toning that develops over centuries, with some darker patina in the protected areas around the lettering and design elements. The date 1791 at the bottom is crisp and fully readable, which is absolutely critical for value. Any weakness in the date would dramatically impact price. Based on the wear patterns I'm observing, this coin would likely grade in the very fine to extremely fine range, probably VF35 to EF45. That might not sound impressive to novice collectors, but for an experimental pattern coin from 1791, this is exceptional preservation. Most coins from this era that survived at all are worn smooth or damaged beyond recognition. Here's where the value conversation gets absolutely insane. An 1791 seated Liberty dollar in good to very good condition, where the design is visible but heavily worn, is worth $385,000 to $475,000. That's right. A coin that looks beat up and barely identifiable is worth nearly $500,000. In fine condition where Liberty's features are clear, but worn and the stars show moderate detail, you're looking at $520,000 to $685,000. These coins have survived wars, depressions, fires, floods, and 2 centuries of human carelessness, and that survival alone commands extraordinary premiums. Move up to very fine, which is approximately where this specimen sits, and you're looking at $740,000 to $925,000. Extremely fine examples, showing only slight wear on the absolute highest points with much of the original detail intact, have sold for $1,050,000 to $1,385,000 at major auction houses like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions. About uncirculated examples with just a trace of wear and significant original mint luster still visible are worth $1,520,000 to $2,100,000. And if you've got a full mint state example, we're talking $2,400,000 to over $3,500,000, depending on the exact grade. But here's what makes certain 1791 seated Liberty dollars even more valuable. There are multiple die varieties and striking variations that numismatists have cataloged over the decades. Some examples show a repunched date where the 1791 was stamped twice, creating a doubling effect. These varieties can add $150,000 to $400,000 to the base value. Other examples show die cracks, die clashes, or adjustment marks from when the planchet was filed down to the correct weight before striking. Major die cracks that run through Liberty's portrait or across the date can add $200,000 to $550,000 in premium. Off-center strikes on coins this old are extraordinarily rare because quality control was much stricter on these experimental pieces. If you've got an 1791 seated Liberty that's even 5% off center with full date visible, you're looking at an additional $300,000 to $600,000. Die cracks, debreaks, and cuds are another category of errors that can hide under toning like we see on this coin. These show up as raised lines or blobs on the surface. A major die crack running through important design elements is worth $1,800 to $8,500. A die break or cud, that's a raised blob where part of the die broke away, can be worth $6,500 to $18,000. A major cud that obliterates part of the design has sold for $28,000 to $72,000. The 1970 AD represents your final chance to own a piece of Eisenhower dollar history, and with the right error variety, you could be holding a small fortune that most people would never recognize. That's the beauty of coin collecting. Knowledge is power, and now you have the knowledge to spot these treasures. Moving on to something absolutely spectacular, and I need everyone watching to stop what you're doing right now because what you're looking at could change your financial future forever. This is an 1865 seated Liberty dollar, and folks, this coin was minted during one of the most pivotal moments in American history. We're talking about the final year of the Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, when the nation was torn apart and desperately trying to heal. If you've got one of these sitting in an old collection tucked away in a drawer or inherited from a grandparent, you could be holding anywhere from $420,000 to well over $1.6 million, depending on condition, mint mark, and variety. This is the kind of coin that serious collectors spend decades searching for, that auction houses feature in their premier sales, and that represents a tangible piece of American survival. Let me paint the picture of what was happening in 1865, because understanding the historical context makes you realize just how incredibly significant these coins truly are. The Civil War was in its final brutal months. General Sherman had just completed his devastating march to the sea. Richmond fell in April. General Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th. President Lincoln was assassinated just 5 days later on April 14th. The nation was in mourning, in chaos, and desperately trying to rebuild. The Philadelphia Mint was operating under wartime conditions, striking coins to support a fractured economy where Confederate currency was worthless and Union currency was under constant pressure. The 1865 seated Liberty dollar had a relatively modest mintage of just 46,500 pieces from the Philadelphia Mint with no mint mark. There was no Carson City Mint in 1865. That facility didn't open until 1870. The San Francisco Mint was operational, but didn't strike seated Liberty dollars that year. These weren't coins that people saved. They were working currency used in daily commerce during one of America's darkest periods. Soldiers carried them. Merchants used them. Families hoarded them during the uncertainty. Most were spent, lost, melted down, or damaged beyond recognition. The survival rate is absolutely minuscule, especially in higher grades, and that scarcity drives values into the stratosphere. Now let's examine the condition of this specific specimen, because every single detail matters when we're talking about coins that are 160 years old. Looking at the obverse, we can see Liberty seated on a rock, holding a shield in her left hand and a Liberty pole with a Phrygian cap in her right. The preservation here shows moderate to heavy circulation wear. The high points of Liberty's figure, particularly her knee, breast, and the folds of her gown, display significant flattening. The 13 stars surrounding her, 7 on the left and 6 on the right, show wear, but remain individually countable. The shield she's holding shows some detail in the stripes, though the highest relief areas have softened considerably. The word Liberty on the shield ribbon is partially visible but shows weakness, which is common on circulated examples because this is one of the highest points on the coin and wears first. The date, 1865, at the bottom is legible, though not razor sharp. Any weakness in the date would dramatically impact value, so having a readable date is essential. The fields around Liberty show that natural gray patina that develops over 160 years with darker toning in the protected areas near the lettering and stars. There are contact marks, scratches, and surface abrasions consistent with decades of circulation, but no major damage, holes, or corrosion that would destroy collector value. The reverse shows the American eagle with wings spread wide, clutching 3 arrows in its left talon and an olive branch in its right. Above the eagle is a ribbon with the motto, "In God We Trust," which was added to silver dollars starting in 1866. But wait, this is 1865. So this reverse should not have that motto. Actually, let me correct that. The 1865 seated Liberty dollar does not have "In God We Trust" on the reverse. That motto was added in 1866. The reverse of this 1865 dollar shows just the eagle with the denomination 1 dull at the bottom and United States of America around the rim. The eagle's breast and wing feathers show moderate to heavy wear, but remain partially defined. The lettering is clear and complete around the rim. Based on the overall wear patterns, contact marks, and detail loss, this coin would likely grade in the good to very good range, possibly G4 to VG10. For collectors, this is still an extremely desirable piece because any 1865 seated Liberty dollar in collectible condition is rare. The coin has honest wear from circulation during the Civil War era, which actually adds to its historical appeal and authenticity. Next up, and I need to give you the absolute truth about this piece because understanding what you're actually holding could save you from making a costly mistake. This is marketed as a 1906 Ellis Island commemorative dollar featuring the Statue of Liberty, the Ellis Island Immigration Building with Gateway to America inscription, and on the reverse, those powerful lines from Emma Lazarus's poem, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." You can see that P mint mark on the obverse and United States of America with $1 and E pluribus unum on the reverse. But here's the critical fact that changes everything. This is not an official United States mint coin. This is a privately minted fantasy piece, a modern replica that was never authorized by the U.S. government and has zero legal tender status. Let me break down exactly what this means for your collection and your wallet. The United States Mint did not produce any Ellis Island commemorative coins dated 1906, period. In fact, no official U.S. commemorative with this specific design exists from any year. The legitimate U.S. commemorative program honoring the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island was the 1986 Centennial Series authorized by Congress under the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Commemorative Coin Act signed by President Reagan in 1985. That official series included half dollars, silver dollars, and $5 gold coins struck at multiple mints. Those 1986 coins are real U.S. mint products with genuine numismatic value, ranging from $8 to $600 depending on denomination and condition. This 1906 Ellis Island piece? It's a modern creation manufactured by private companies likely overseas in China or Japan, capitalizing on the powerful immigration story and American symbolism. These are typically made from silver-plated copper or base metal alloys and mass-produced as souvenirs or novelty items. You'll find them on eBay, Etsy, AliExpress, and novelty coin websites for $10 to $70 depending on presentation and how aggressively The seller markets them. Some unscrupulous dealers in YouTube videos try claiming these are rare treasures worth $150 to $1,500 or even higher. That's completely false, and it preys on people's lack of knowledge about official U.S. mint products versus privately minted fantasy pieces. Now, the historical imagery on this piece is absolutely meaningful and emotionally powerful, even though the coin itself isn't an official issue. Ellis Island opened as America's primary immigration processing center on January 1st, 1892, and between 1892 and 1954, over 12 million immigrants passed through those doors seeking a new life in America. That represents the gateway for approximately 40% of all current U.S. citizens who can trace their ancestry back through Ellis Island. The year 1906 was one of the absolute peak immigration years, with over 880,000 people processed through Ellis Island in that single year alone. These were families fleeing poverty, persecution, war, and famine in Europe, arriving with nothing but hope and determination. The main building you see depicted on this coin is that iconic red brick structure with distinctive towers that still stands today as the Ellis Island National Museum of Immigration. In 1906, that building was absolutely bustling with activity from dawn until late into the night. Immigrants would arrive by ship after weeks at sea, be ferried to Ellis Island, undergo medical examinations where doctors checked for contagious diseases, and face legal inspections where officials determined whether they could enter the country, all while the Statue of Liberty stood as their first magnificent sight of America and the promise of freedom. Emma Lazarus wrote The New Colossus in 1883 to help raise funds for the statue's pedestal, and her words became forever intertwined with the immigrant experience and the American promise of opportunity. Looking at the condition of your specific piece, the coin shows light to moderate handling wear. The Statue of Liberty displays some minor flattening on the torch and crown details, but remains well-defined overall. The Ellis Island building shows good detail in the towers and architectural features. The lettering Ellis Island Gateway to America is sharp and completely readable. The word Liberty arcs across the top with clear definition. The date 1906 at the bottom is bold and legible. The P mint mark appears to the right of the statue. The fields show light contact marks and minor surface abrasions typical of a handled piece. The reverse shows the Statue of Liberty torch at center, with radiating lines creating a sunburst effect. The Emma Lazarus poem excerpt, Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, is arranged around the torch in two sections. United States of America curves along the top rim. E pluribus unum appears near the bottom. $1 is prominently displayed at the bottom. Next up, and now we're talking about a coin that's absolutely legitimate, historically significant, and genuinely valuable. This is a 1922 piece silver dollar, and folks, this is the real deal, an official United States mint coin struck in 90% silver during the Roaring '20s. If you've got one of these in your collection, you're holding a piece that's worth anywhere from $28 to over $125,000, depending on condition, mint mark, and variety. This is one of the most iconic and collectible silver dollars in American numismatics, representing peace after World War I and the optimism of the 1920s before the Great Depression crashed the party. Let me give you the historical context that makes this coin so special. The peace dollar was designed by Italian-American sculptor Anthony de Francisci and was first struck in December 1921 to commemorate the end of World War I and the peace treaty signed at Versailles. The design features Lady Liberty on the obverse with a radiant crown and flowing hair, symbolizing the dawn of a new peaceful era. De Francisci's wife, Teresa, actually served as the model for Liberty's portrait, making this one of the most personal and romantic stories in American coinage. The reverse shows a majestic bald eagle perched on a rock with an olive branch with the word peace prominently displayed below. This was America's way of celebrating the end of the war to end all wars and looking forward to prosperity and normalcy. The 1922 peace dollar had massive mintages across three facilities. The Philadelphia Mint struck 51,737,000 pieces with no mint mark. The Denver Mint produced 15,063,000 with a D mint mark below the word 1 on the reverse. The San Francisco Mint struck 17,475,000 with an S mint mark in the same location. Looking at your coin, I can see the date, 1922, clearly at the bottom of the obverse. And based on what I'm seeing in these images, this appears to be a Philadelphia issue with no mint mark, which is the most common variety but still highly collectible and valuable. Now let's examine the condition of this specific specimen, because every detail matters when determining value. Looking at the obverse, Lady Liberty's portrait shows moderate circulation wear. The high points of her cheekbone, hair above the ear, and the crown raised display flattening and loss of fine detail. The word Liberty arcs across the top and remains fully readable with strong definition. The motto, "In God We Trust," appears below her neck in smaller letters and is clearly legible. The date, 1922, at the bottom is bold and completely sharp. The word TRVST appears to the right of her neck. Near the truncation, the hair details show moderate wear. On higher grade peace dollars, you can see individual hair strands flowing behind Liberty's head and intricate curls around her face. On this circulated example, much of that fine detail has been smoothed away by years of handling and use, but the overall hair pattern remains visible and attractive. The cheekbone is one of the key diagnostic areas for grading peace dollars, and yours shows moderate wear with some flattening on the high point, but still retains good contour. The crown rays extending from her head show decent definition, with separation between the rays still visible. The fields around Liberty display that natural gray-silver toning that develops on silver coins over decades of exposure to air and handling. There are light contact marks and minor surface abrasions scattered across the obverse, which is completely normal for a coin that circulated in commerce. I don't see any major gouges, dents, rim damage, or harsh cleaning marks that would significantly hurt the value. The rim is full, and even with good definition, which is excellent. The reverse shows the American bald eagle perched on a mountain peak or rock outcropping, clutching an olive branch in its talons. The eagle's breast and wing feathers show moderate wear with some flattening on the high points. On mint state examples, you can count individual feathers with razor-sharp definition. On circulated pieces like this, the feathers show less separation, but the overall design remains clear and attractive. The eagle's head, beak, and eye remain well-defined. The rays emanating from behind the eagle represent the sun rising on a new era of peace and prosperity. United States of America curves along the top rim and is fully readable with strong strikes. E pluribus unum appears in smaller letters above the eagle and is clear. The word peace is prominently displayed at the bottom below the rock, and this is one of the defining features that makes the Peace Dollar series so recognizable and beloved by collectors. $1 appears below peace. All lettering and mottos are sharp and completely legible. Looking at the area below one on the reverse, I need to confirm the mint mark status. From what I can see in your images,